everyone, this is Carissa from Summerlin Studios, and we're going to walk through how to set up a client project tracker in Notion. And the goal with this is not just to have this in Notion, but to integrate it with your CRM so that you're actually getting updates made to this manually when you check things off, but also triggered by certain things that are already happening in your CRM. So if you haven't watched part one of this video, I would suggest you go back and do that first. That's going to show you how to set up Zapier so that you are connected to your CRM and to Notion. And this video will actually go through setting up the database. So you might want to actually follow this step first, but that will help you set up the Zapier connection so that you're all ready to go and understand how that portion works. So in this video, what we'll cover is we're going to set up, replicate this database here. This is an existing template that I have, and feel free to grab the template instead and go ahead and customize it. But if you prefer to build it yourself, we're going to walk through on how to recreate this in Notion, and then also how to do a more advanced step in Zapier. If you are have or are willing to get the paid version of Zapier, where we can actually, instead of just create the client in this database, we'll actually make updates based on various things that happen in the CRM. So we'll go over that as well. So just to give you an overview of what we're going to look at, we're going to create this database, and it essentially has an entry for each project that you have ongoing, and you can record fields like the start date, your target end date, and then the checklist is really just a way for you to have a comprehensive checklist of small steps that you go through with each client. So this is more detailed than you'd normally keep in your CRM, but it allows you to check off each individual step and see exactly what you've done and what you haven't done and where each person is. So we'll have this series of different checkboxes ending with closeout, and when the closeout is checked, that would indicate that this project is completed and it's officially done. And we can also fill in the end date as well. And we will also create a couple different views here. So this view is a checklist view, and it is sorted by your project date, and it is also filtered to only projects that are not closed out. And we have a different view, which is the opposite, would be only projects that are closed out. And then also a way to view it as a Kanban board if you prefer to view it as overall status. And this overall status field is a formula field we'll go over later based on various things that you're defining in here that make sense to you and how to set your status. Alternately, if you have a status in your CRM, you can also pull that status in instead of recreating it in here, whichever you prefer. So this will be our end goal, and we're going to go ahead and start from scratch and completely recreate this. So let me move this window. And we're going to open a brand new Notion Workspace. Nothing in it, completely brand new. We're starting with an empty page. And in fact, we're going to start with an empty table. Table in Notion is database, same thing. You can think of them the same way. So we're going to start as a table, and we want to name it. We're going to name it Client Project Tracker. And it's a brand new database. So you'll see it's going to create this brand new empty database, nothing interesting, nothing going on here yet. We have the ability to completely customize this now, add all the fields that we want, and then add some logic behind them as well. So the name field I'm going to leave the same. Notion does require this field, and there's not a whole lot about it you can change. So name kind of makes sense to me. It's the project name. We can leave that as is. Tags, you're welcome to leave this if it makes sense for you. In this case, I don't necessarily want to sort my project by tags, so I'm going to delete this field, and then we'll add some more that make sense for me. So the first one I want to add is an important thing for me to track is the project start date. I'm going to pull this in from my CRM. So we're going to add a project start date, and the type for this one is a date. And you can go ahead and format it if you want to. In this case, I want it to be a full date. That's fine. I think that's easier to read. So we'll leave that as is. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this because I'm also going to do a target end date. Oops. Target end date. And then I'm going to duplicate it one more time. And this will be our actual end date. So one thing that's nice about this is that it allows you to track this information so you can go back and see where your target end dates are versus your actuals, and that's, I think, valuable information for you to have to be able to look back on. Okay, so started pretty straightforward. We added our date fields, and now we're going to add a whole bunch of checkboxes. So for simplicity here, I'm not going to add every single checkbox that I have in the final template because it's likely that the ones that I have are not the exact ones that you're going to use anyway. So I'm going to show you how to add the checkboxes and how to use them, but specifically which ones you add and how many is really completely up to you and up to your use case. So we're going to go add a new property again, and let's name this one. The first thing in my workflow here would be to schedule a consult. And then the type here is checkbox. So schedule consult, that way I can check it off once I schedule a consult with them and I know that it's all set. Or again, you could have that checked off by your CRM if that's something that your CRM is able to send information-wise through Zapier. You could have that checked off as well. And then my next one, actually, let's just go ahead and duplicate this, is I might send a proposal. So we had our consult, we go over what they want, I've sent the proposal to them, and now that I've done that, sent it, and I can go ahead and check that off. And let's duplicate it again. And we want to track that they have signed the contract. Now this is one that we will talk about with Zapier. This is the example that I'm going to use, is when they sign their contract using my CRM, which is Dubsado, I can send that through Zapier and automatically check off this box in Notion. And then the next thing might be, let's duplicate it again, that they paid their invoice. Again, you can, this one, most CRMs I think will have an action for that in Zapier, so you can send that over automatically. And then let's say we want a checkbox. Let's duplicate it again. And now I've decided that they are fully onboarded. So maybe I have back in my CRM, once they pay the invoice, I have an automatic email that goes out to them that sends them all the information that they need to get to their client portal. So now I know that they have all of that. I have their payment. They're fully onboarded. We're ready to go. And then let's see some other ones that might make sense here. I could have a checkbox saying they're fully onboarded, but now I know I've actually started on their project. It's in process. And maybe I send them a status update to let them know how things are going. And then maybe when we're done, I'll send a final approval request. And let's see. Let's make this, oops, final payment made. So if you have a payment plan and they've made their final payment after the approval is complete, all set, they've paid their final invoice. An important one for me at the end of this is to request a review, which for me in my CRM is an email that would email template that gets sent out with a questionnaire requesting that they leave a review for me. And then we definitely want to have closeout. All right, so we've got all of our checkboxes. And the beautiful thing is if you're doing this manually, if you were just going to come in here and manually track your clients, then this part's really already done. These are all fields that you can fill in. You can check off all your checkboxes. You can scroll through here and see exactly the status of each client and where they are. And it's just a really handy way to look at that information. So let's put in some sample data. Just to see how this would look. So let's say their start date was back in June. Their target end date was June 29th. Actual end date maybe it was July 1st. So in this case, we've gone through the whole process. So we'll check off all of these boxes. And this one is already closed out. And we'll add another one. And let's say we've started maybe already on theirs, but their target end date isn't until August. And we've scheduled a client, scheduled a consult, sent a proposal, and they've signed the contract, but that's it. We haven't gotten any further yet. That's as far as they've gotten. And then one more. And we don't have a project start date for them, and we're still waiting to schedule a consult. So their project has gotten created, but that's as far as we've gotten. Nothing else has happened here. So now that we've gotten all this data, we've gotten this setup done, we've got all this information, and now what we want to do is be able to have this in a way, or a couple different ways really, that we can look at the information and get what we need from this data at the right time and in a way that's really easy to digest. So what we've created so far is just a database. This isn't a page in Notion, it's strictly a database. So for me, what I prefer is to leave my database as is, to not filter or sort it or create any views or anything like that on the database itself. But we're going to go create a page and make it sort of a landing page for this, or you could add it to a landing page for your business if you already have one. And that's where we're going to create our different views, different ways of sorting and filtering the data, and give us a way to look at different things depending on what we're looking for. So we're going to go create a page. And we'll call it a dashboard. We're going to create an empty page to start with. And just a couple personal preferences. I like the full page, and maybe we'll go with the serif font. Again, totally just personal preference here, what you want it to look like. And then maybe we want to add a cover. Your cover is just sort of a header. You can choose from their gallery. You can upload any image on your own. I like to use Unsplash, which is a free stock image site. So you can kind of search, and generally you'll find something that's similar to what you're looking for. So we search business, maybe we search for desk. Something nice and clean. I highly suggest for Notion that you do add things like your cover photos and icons and all that. I really think that having something aesthetically pleasing, whatever that means to you, makes you more likely to use it. So that's kind of something that's important to me. Reposition this so it looks how I want it to look. And then I'm also going to add the icon, which is just our little thing over here. And let's try this. Look for a check mark here. And then we can make it any color we want. There we go. So now I've got my basic empty page, and now what I want to do is we're going to create a couple different views of your client project tracker to show on this page. So Notion, when you're trying to add anything to your page, you want to hit the backspace, and in this case, we're going to look for our database. We already created the database, so we're creating a linked view of a database. What that means is the database exists on its own, separate from this page, and we're going to create a link to that existing database. We're not creating a new one, we're not duplicating it, nothing like that. We're only linking to what already exists. And we're going to create check this one. And then again, just personal preference here. I like to hide the database title. So right now, all I pulled in is that same existing table view that we already created. This is completely uncustomized, right? We haven't filtered, we haven't sorted. Every single property is showing, and it's a really basic table. So I do think we want one view that will show us this entire table. Maybe make some tweaks so that it's easier to see all the pages, but I do think we do want to see it this way. So we are going to leave a view as this entire table so that you can just quickly look through and scroll through and see where everything is. I think we're going to go ahead and move the actual end date to the end though, if that makes sense. And then we're also going to do two more things. First of all, we're going to sort, and we're going to sort by the project start date because that's the first thing that we know. So it makes more sense to sort by that than even by target end date because we might not have a target end date right away. So we're going to leave that. And then we're going to add a filter. And in this case, we only want to look at projects that are in progress. We don't want to look at ones that are already completed. So we're going to filter it by ones where the closeout checkbox here is unchecked. And that's going to make it so that we are only seeing in progress. You'll see the client A disappeared because that one is already completed. Closeout is checked off. Now we're only seeing in progress clients, so it's not cluttered by things that we've already done and we don't need to look at anymore. And we're also going to rename this to in progress projects. All right. With that said, we might also want to be able to look back on our completed projects. So see which ones we have already done if we need to look it up for reference. So the easiest way, if we want to create this same essential view with a different filter, the easiest way to do that is to right click here and we're just going to duplicate it. And we're going to rename it. And this is completed projects. And we're going to leave the sort. We still want to sort it by project start date, or you could change it maybe at this point since we know it does have an end date. You could sort it by end date. That might make more sense for you. And we're going to filter it the opposite before. So we're only going to do where closeout is checked. And now you'll see our client A pops back up, and that way we can come back here and look at it for a reference. So now that we've done the basic views here, we've got an easy way to look at our overview. We've got all of our checkboxes. We can see our in progress versus our completed projects. The next step I'm going to add is a little bit more complex and may or may not be something that you find useful, but I do want to go over it in case it is. So what I want to do is I'm going to go back to our database and I'm going to add a status field. So you have two options, well, three options here really. One, you can make it a manual field. You could manually change the status. I don't think in this case that's probably the most useful thing for you to do, but it is an option. Option two would be if your CRM has a status for your project that you can send over, then you could populate it with that. Or option three in this case is we're going to create a formula field based on these checkboxes to determine what the status should be based on what's been done and what hasn't been done. All right, so I'm going to hop back over to our database. You can create new fields and new properties in the views, that's fine, but I prefer to do this all in the database. I just find it a little simpler when I know that I'm seeing everything and not missing anything that I have filtered out or hidden. So we're going to create a new property again. And let's call it project status. And the type in this case, we're going to make it a formula. And then we're going to click edit, and that lets us edit the formula. Now, you can do relatively advanced formulas in Notion. The way it does if formulas is a little hard to read. If I was just to copy my formula in here, you wouldn't really be able to tell what it's doing. So I'm actually going to pull it up in Notepad, show you how the formula works, and that way you can take what's here and then tweak it because it is based on checkboxes, which will be different for you than it is for me, and create your formula based off of that. So I'm going to pull it up in here in a way that makes it make a little bit more sense, hopefully. And the way, this is how Notion does if statements. So there's no ands or ors in here. It's all nested if statements. And that's how it's determining what these statuses are. So you can see we've got the if statement on the outside here. And then I've got a bunch of different options that are going to determine the status of my project. So if the schedule consult is checked, that's the first step, right? If I've said I'm going to schedule a consult with them, then my status for the project is new. It's brand new. But if the signed contract one, so each one of these going up sort of overrides the one before it. So we're going to go up sort of like a hierarchy. If the contract has been signed, then in this case, the status will be onboarding. They've signed the contract, they're onboarding in progress. Then if the fully onboarded is checked, then their project is in progress. It's started, we're working on it. And then if the final approval request is checked, then it's in project closeout. And then if the closeout is checked, it's completed. So you want this to kind of go as a hierarchy, starting with the one that comes first, all the way up to the one that comes last is going to sort of be on the outside. So you can change these, you can add steps. I do recommend writing it out and formatting it like this before you go ahead and put it in your formula field. It just makes it easier to read, in my opinion. If you try to look at all these nested if statements, it can get a little bit tricky. Also, if you're looking at this and this seems really intimidating, like I said, you can also make this a manual field with different options, or you can pull it in from your CRM, or feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to help you write some logic for an if statement that makes sense for you once you've got your database set up. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead using this, and we're going to copy it into that field. Now, what's probably going to happen is Notion is going to complain with spaces and things like that, so I am going to collapse all of this down into one line so that I can easily copy it in. And now I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to put it in my formula editor here. And if anything is wrong, it would tell you. If you have, a lot of times it's just spaces or things like that when you copied it. Otherwise, if it looks good, we're going to click done. And then let's drag this back to the very front. And in this case, I maybe should have started it with new. Since we haven't scheduled consult for this case, we're going to assume that that's the actual first step of the project, and that's what gives it a status. So now you can see we've determined the status. All of our projects have a status. If you prefer to make this a manual option, let me just show you quickly how to do that too. Make a project status manual. This type is going to instead be a, well, actually, I take that back. We're going to use status. We're going to use Notion's built-in status options. They actually have a status field. And this is pretty neat because you can create different options within here. So you can have like a not started status, and then you can create sub-statuses within this. So let's say to do might be not started or might be new. Maybe we have both of those options. In progress. And in progress, we might also have onboarding. And then we have in progress. What else did we put in here? Fully onboarded, completed, in closeout. So in progress might also have in closeout. So now we've got these different options, and they are categorized into different categories, right? So you can create all these different statuses. Pull it back to the front, and then you can set these to whatever you want it to. So we can set it to done, set this one to onboarding, set this one to new. So you can definitely do this manually as well, or like I said, you can interface this over from your CRM if that makes more sense and you already have a status there. Then it doesn't make sense to recreate the work and do it all over again here. So let's hop back over to our page where we have all of our formatting. And we're going to do the same thing here. We'll pull the project status out to the front. And I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to hide it since we already have the one that we're using. So to hide the field in Notion, I can right click on it and click hide in view. Or if I look at the whole properties shown in my view right here, I can scroll down and just click the I to hide the ones I'm not using. So whichever one is quicker for you to do, we're going to hide it. All right, so now that we have created this status field, the nice thing that we can also do here is we can add a view that is a Kanban board view, which just makes it a little easier way to see an overview of what status things are in. So we're going to create another new view. We're not going to copy it this time because it's not a table, so we're going to start from scratch. And so we want a new empty view, and we're going to do a board. And again, I'm going to turn off the database title, personal preference, and then a couple other options here. So card preview, this is the card, is our little indicator for our project. And we have a couple options. We can leave it as none, so it's just the title. We could set it to a cover. So if we had an image on it, like we did to our page, that can make it look nice. In this case, we probably won't have an image associated with the project. So I'm going to set it to content, which will actually show part of what's inside the information about this client if you had anything in there. So we're going to set it to that. And then for group by, because it knew that manual one we created as a status field, it selected that by default, but you can change that. So we're going to come and choose our project status formula field we created. We want to group it by that. You have a couple different options for sorting. Alphabetical or reverse alphabetical is probably not relevant here. We want to do a manual sorting. So we're going to come down here, and this lets us manually order the fields we want here. So new is going to be first, onboarding, and then completed. It's only going to show the statuses that we have in use here since it's a formula field. So you might have to come back here once you have all your statuses in use and change the order. We're also going to hide ones that don't have any status. That's not really relevant here. And in fact, let's hide completed as well because we have a separate view for that. We don't need to see completed projects here. All right. And then again, you always have the option to sort. So we might want to sort these by project start date. Right now, there's only one of these in each. So this doesn't seem like much, but if you had multiple projects, that would probably be important. And we're also going to filter again to filter out our completed projects. So we're going to do our closeout is unchecked only. And then you have a couple other options here. Load limit would be how many of these display. So if you have a whole lot of projects, you might want to limit that so your page doesn't get too hard to see. In this case, I'm not particularly concerned about that. And we already defined our group. So now we've got this handy little Kanban board. So the other thing to know in Notion is that each database entry, other than the properties and the fields that you set up here, each entry is its own page. So if you click into it, you can see all your properties in order, which can be also another nice way to look at this. But it's also a page down here. So we can put any information that we want to put in here. So again, we're going to tap the backslash to pull up our options. We can add text, we can make to-do lists, we can add other tables, we can format text, add images, any information that you wanted to track about your client, you can put in here. And one of the probably most beneficial ways to do this, if I close this back out, is to create a template. And a template just is a way to create basically a reusable page that you can put inside your clients as a shell that you can fill in. So where our new option is, which is how we'd add a new client if we did it manually, click the drop down and click new template. So this can be handy if you have different types of client projects. You can actually have different templates for each one and put different information in them. Oops. So we'll make a general template here. And then we're going to format this in a way that tells us what information we might want to put in here. So let's say, let's add a heading. Basic information we want to put in about our client here. And again, I like to put formatting in that makes it more useful for me. Text. Client info goes here. Let's add another section. And actually, let's turn this one into a toggle. I use toggles a lot in Notion. I find them very useful for putting a bunch of information in, but also being able to hide it. So let's make this, maybe make it a phone log. So that way when we have a call, we can put all the information from their phone log in there. And Let's do one more. And maybe we want to keep track of all the links that they're associated with, their socials, their website, things like that. So we can add all that information in. And really anything that you want to keep track of here, you can do. We can put in a to-do list if we want to have to-dos. I also personally recommend you have an overall to-do list in Notion, and I'll do a video specifically covering that at some point. But you can make a quick to-do list in here. Maybe we want to copy that header. So we can keep track of specific things we want to do for that client. So as you can see, it's really endless. You know, whatever makes sense for you to keep track of in here is the sort of thing we can keep track of in this template. So we're going to go ahead and save this template. And then when we create a new client, oh, sorry, one more step here, sorry. We're going to go back and we're going to click these three dots and we're going to make this the default template. And that's important because if we're creating clients from our CRM, we want this to be the default template they get created with. So now let's make a new client. Let's make a client D project. And you'll see it populated all this for me. So I can go ahead and put all this information in and it's already set up and laid out the way that I want it to be. And so this is the basic view for the client tracker. We've basically set everything up at this point. We've looked at a couple different ways of viewing the data. You should be comfortable adding different checkboxes if you wanted to, different dates, the select fields like a status if you wanted to do that. And the next step here is to connect it to your CRM. So if you're not interested in doing that and you're only using this manually, then feel free to take this and run with it, customize it, whatever makes sense. If you want to integrate it with your CRM, we're going to go back over to Zapier and set up additional Zaps. In addition to the one that we created before, we'll modify the one before to link it to this database that we now have created. And then we'll also go over how to update existing entries in your database in Zapier, which again does require a paid plan for Zapier. So if that's something you already have or you have other use cases for it, then you really can do a lot of powerful things and save yourself some time for the payment that you would have to make. Now we're going to come back over to Zapier. We're going to go into this Zap that we created initially. I just want to show you how to now, if you connected it to Notion before, how to create it to this correct database that you just created. So make sure that your account is correct. What you might need to do is go back into this account and give it access to your page. So if you need to do that, you can redo your connection here and make sure that you selected the correct pages. Make sure these ones I just created, I'm allowing access to those specific pages. And then the only other thing I want to do is if you are planning to create a Zap that also does an update of your project in Zapier, you want to make sure that you know exactly what the project is named. So your best bet in this case is to set so we're inside of our Notion, right? We're creating the database item in Notion. We want to set the title to be the same as the title in our CRM so that we are able to figure out exactly what it is going forward and be able to reuse that. So in this case, I just set it to the title coming from Dubsado. Oops, I went twice. So now I will always know what that project is called. I can look at Dubsado and get the title and know that Notion will have that exact same title. And then when we did this first time, we set our start time. That's the only thing that we want to set initially to create it. And then let's go ahead and test it one more time just to make sure that this is working. All right, so now we'll see it's got the same as the title in Dubsado and it created our start date correctly. And then once we hop in here, we have the option to choose the template. We want to make sure we use that one we just chose. So it is creating it correctly. So if this is all you're looking to do, at this point, you've got a fully working system. So you've got your Zap created. We want to make sure we update it. If you made changes, you'll want to publish it. But at this point, you are now, every time a project is created in Dubsado, it's going to create a project for you in Notion. And then you can come in here and do your checkboxes as you go. Your project status will change. You can see all your in progress projects. We can look at them on a board view. And then you'll see once this information is filled in, that would show up here now that we've created content inside the entry. So you've got a couple different ways of looking at it. And I think this is a really handy way to be able to have this sort of checklist to go through for each project, just as a way to see exactly what you need to do next or what's been done. And if you want to take it one step further and you want to use Zapier to update instead of just create these projects, I think that's where you really start tapping into some of this automation power and the ways where you can really kind of save yourself time, which in the end is going to save you money also. Go back to Zapier and create an additional Zap. And for me, I have multiple. I have the initial create one. I have one that's triggered when the client signs the contract. I have one that is triggered when the client pays their invoice. So it depends on what makes sense for your projects and also what your CRM particularly has for triggers in Zapier. So we're going to go back and create a Zap. And where our trigger again is going to be Dubsado. And our event in this case, we're going to do this when the contract is signed. So again, we'll choose our account. If you only have one, only one will show up there. I have multiple, so I have to choose. And we'll test our trigger again. All right, so you've got the same test project that I created. This is telling me that my trigger is working correctly. It's pulling this one because the contract is signed. Again, if you don't have one that's recently had a signed contract, create a test project, sign the contract so that you can make sure that this is working correctly. So we'll continue with that. And this is the part where you end up needing to have the paid version of Zapier because you can do a simple trigger action in Zapier for free. But in order to be able to figure out which entry we're updating in that database because it already exists, we need to have an additional step to be able to search that database and find it, which makes this multiple steps in the Zap, and that way does require the paid subscription. All right, so we're going to pull up Notion again. And our event in this case is we want to search. We want to find the database item. So we want to find the one that matches this project that already exists from Dubsado, and then we update it. But we have to find it first. Yeah, we're going to choose our Notion account. And then we're going to select our database, which again is our client tracker. And do we want this to be a success if nothing is found? In this case, we don't, because since by the time they signed the contract, the project obviously was already created. We don't want anything to happen if it can't find that project. If it can't find that project, probably something went wrong and we're going to have to go manually figure out what happened. So we're going to skip this because if we can't find it, we don't want anything else to happen. We're going to skip it. That's fine. Another option is you can create it if it doesn't exist yet. But like I said, in this use case, it should always exist already. I don't want it to create it if it doesn't exist because probably something else went wrong and I need to look at it, and I don't want it to just create it and assume everything is okay. So selected our database. Now here's where the important thing comes in. The title that we want to search for is the product title in Dubsado. And that's why we changed our initial Zap to make sure we know what the project title is so that we can easily search on it now. And we can click continue. And again, it's going to do a search. And it's searching for it, and it found this correct test project. It's searching for it because this is the one we tested within Dubsado. It was looking for that same title in Notion, And because we had that project already created in Notion, it was able to go search for it, and it's confirming that it found it. All right, so now we've confirmed that we found the item. Now we're going to add one more action, and again, this is where it gets to be multi-step, is we're going to do this in Notion again, and this time we're going to update a database item. So now we found the database item, now we're going to go update it. Again, connect your account if you haven't, and select our database again. And then item, this is referring to what database item are we updating. So we're going to say custom. We don't want to select an actual item, right? Because it's not the same every time. We want it to be able to look at the search step and then find the item. So we're going to go back to our search step, find database item in Notion, and click on the ID. That's what it's searching for. That's just how this works with Notion. It's always searching for an ID. That's what it's looking for here. So we're going to select that ID. Just do that one more time. Do not select an item here. That will update the same project every time. That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to update whatever project we searched for. So we're going to go in the find step, and we're going to find the ID, and this is saying the ID of whatever project it found in this step. The data here is just an example. That's the test project, but it will update whatever project it found in this step. And I put it twice. All right, and now we can decide what fields we want to update. In this case, they signed the contract, so I want to update the field saying they signed the contract to true. That's going to check off my checkbox. And then if you, for example, maybe you wanted to track what date they signed their contract. So if you had a date field for contract sign, you could also go ahead and populate the date field there, and any other fields that you wanted to update. So we'll click continue, and we're going to test it. Give it a minute because it's doing 2 steps here. So now it's saying it completed successfully. So if we go back over to Notion, this is the test project that we're testing with, and you'll see that it now has a check for signed contract. So anytime a project gets created in your Dubsado, it will get created in Notion. Anytime they sign the contract in Dubsado, that checkbox will get checked off in Notion. We're going to go ahead and publish it to make sure that this completes. And again, you can do in Dubsado, for example, you could do the same thing if they signed their invoice. I think the other important thing to mention here is that once you're using Zapier, especially if you decide to use the paid version, the amount of things that you can do with this is honestly endless. Especially once you've got this client tracker created in Notion, you can do triggers off of that as well. So you could have it that, when you check off a checkbox on that database in Notion, that it sends an email to you, or maybe it sends an email to a business partner. So maybe once you say, final review required, it triggers an email, off to your business partner that they need to do something. Like maybe they're the one that communicates with the client. You could directly send emails to your client, but probably if you have a CRM, you want to do that there, not necessarily here. You could do things like maybe you're a designer and each of your clients, you have a custom Dropbox folder for them, for their project. So when they sign the contract or maybe they pay the invoice, whatever it is, to officially kick off the project with you, that Zapier then goes out to your Dropbox and creates a project folder with that client's name. There's really so many things that you can do to automate your business with this once you start using it, and especially once you start incorporating something like Notion, because it's so flexible to what you can add and really make it whatever you want. There's so many ways that you can use this to simplify your life. So I hope this video is helpful, but honestly, I think a lot of this is just so customized to your personal business. That's why with a lot of my clients, I work with them one-on-one to figure out exactly what their process is, find their pain points, help them strategize ways that they can add this sort of automation and connect their apps to each other. So hopefully this gets you thinking about different things that you can do. I'd love to hear how this worked for you, or maybe ways that you even added to this, made it more custom, made it work for you. I will also put the link to the client tracker template in this video. So if you wanted to go ahead and grab that for me instead of creating this and then just jump right to the Zapier part, save you some time, you can do that as well. or feel free to contact me if you want to work on something more custom or have you help me, or feel free to contact me if you need help setting it up or want to talk about doing something more custom. I hope this is helpful to you, and thanks for watching.